This is the Blaze Radio on demand.
The experts at Web.com want to build your business a successful website for free, just like we did for these current Web.com customers.
We've used and looked at other website designers, but there's nobody better than Web.com.
Web.com can build your website in as little as 7 days free. Plus, we'll promote it on all the major search engines like Google, Yahoo, and Bing. If after 30 days you're happy, we'll continue to provide promotion, hosting, support, and maintenance, all for one low monthly fee. If not, cancel and pay nothing.
If you're in business today and you don't have a web presence, you won't be taken seriously.
Call right now and you'll also get a free .com or .net domain name for your new website powered by VeriSign, the world's leading domain name provider.
Call 800-490-1099 or go to web.com/radio. That's 800-490-1099.
No upfront charge for site build, after which ongoing fees apply. Rights to site are relinquished when canceled. Domain included during active service, after which fees apply.
Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
What's up, Team Buck? Welcome to the Freedom Hut. Thank you very much for being here. Great to have you. Still a lot of stuff about Hillary's health out there. Oh, my. Everybody wants to talk about Hillary's health. I've got friends who are not doctors, nor do they play doctors on TV, sending me in-depth analyses of how there's clearly a neurological issue at work here, has nothing to do with pneumonia. I don't know. I do think this, though, as we look at this. There's simultaneously some pieces, some think pieces. I actually stopped by. I saw my family briefly last night, and as we tend to do, we talked a little bit of politics. And the issue came up of what would happen if Hillary stepped aside. And the only way that could happen, by the way, it's completely based on DNC rules. It's in Hillary's hands if she's going to step aside. Right? So she would have to make that choice herself. The only reasonable or possible way that would happen is at least under the guise of a health excuse. So what's interesting to me is you have, on the one hand, a lot of people who are coming out with taking this as an open door now to rush through with all sorts of theories. I won't say conspiracy theories because that is a pejorative that seems unfair in this case, given that the conspiracy was initially to conceal from the American people that Hillary Clinton was sick, right? That her handlers and perhaps some in the media around her, some of the traveling press corps, I don't know, but certainly some people decided that they were going to lie about her health at a time when there were already questions about her health. By the way, as a side note, I saw this, and it's from a verified account on Twitter, and so I'm hoping this isn't fake. You know, whenever you start using social media as a primary source for anything, that can be a problem. It's from a verified NBC Politics account back in 2008. They ran a story, 1 in 4 chance McCain may not survive second term. So there's there's one of the broadcast news channels doing a story about how they think if John McCain had been elected, he had a 25% chance of dying in his second term based on the numbers. And that was considered a news story. So health and age, and this is all very much what you'd consider to be fair game for political discussion, as we have been talking about it here. And the notion that people, I kind of like this moment in time for a bunch of reasons. One is you see who are clearly delusional Hillary supporters, the people that come out and run with defenses of this is about sexism. Oh, it's so sexist to talk about her health and say that she to accept that she was overheated was sexist, to deny that she was overheated was sexist. It was sexist no matter what. This is the way the left treats a lot of issues, right? You can never. They just want to bludgeon you with a term. It doesn't matter what position you take on it at any given time. But so Hillary's health is an issue. I'm reading the emails I'm getting, and of course on Facebook and such, people are reaching out as well and telling me that they have a friend who's a doctor or they know this and that, and of people telling me she has Parkinson's. People are telling me she has a seizure disorder. People are telling me she's got she's has Alzheimer's. I don't know. The New York Times is now calling for not radical, I should say, but for health transparency. Interestingly enough, that was the latest that I saw on that. So this has become the topic du jour, or perhaps du semaine. This is the topic of the week, it seems, until we get into the debate. Because of a couple of things. And I'll get back to, by the way, the notion of a Hillary replacement and what that would mean. This has been a largely substance-free political competition between Trump and Hillary. It is entirely about style and personality. It is, generally speaking, not really about political substance. Sure, they both, at least in general, hold the sort of core positions of their respective parties, at least on paper. I know you could say Trump doesn't believe it or he'll change, but that's not really the point of this. The point is that you'll notice that no one's really running ads about Obamacare or not discussing taxes. They speak about issues that Americans care about, but only in the most general terms. Both of them do. And it's just turned into an effort, as far as I can see. The whole thing is just an effort to convince the other side, or rather convince people in general that the other side, whether it's Hillary or Trump, is evil, dishonest, vile, bad. This is about as ugly on a personal level, I feel like, as a campaign could get in the presidential level, at least. It's certainly a lot uglier than things. I know people accuse Mitt Romney of, not caring when people died of cancer and such, but that was at least there were some other issues that were involved in those campaigns as well. I mean, this is really just about who's a bigger liar, who's a worse human being, who can be trusted more or less. So all of that is happening right now. On to the replacement of Hillary thing. Fox News had it might have even been their main, on foxnews.com, their main story this morning. Yeah, it was. It's now been replaced by more stuff on the Clinton IT experts. If Hillary drops out, they're asking the question, and I talked to some of my family members about this last night as well. I think that would be, if you don't want a Democrat in the White House, I think Hillary dropping out would be really bad. I know that she has a tremendous amount of name recognition and star power, and the whole machine is behind her. But I think that if Joe Biden was put in there, they could do an instantaneous reset on, for example, first of all, Joe's already set the groundwork for his son, Beau, who honorably served, I believe, in the Marines. I know he served in the armed forces, who died of a brain tumor earlier. His last wish was for Joe to run. You can see the story is all right there, and Biden's been quiet long enough that people just know of him as the vice president. You'd have kind of a standard run-of-the-mill Democrat with high enough name recognition, and the VP, he's current VP. Seems like a pretty seamless transition. I think Biden's a much tougher candidate at this point for Trump than Hillary is. I really do. So it's interesting to me that while I see that the chances of Hillary voluntarily dropping out, even if she was really sick, by the way, meaning not just that she has been sick, obviously, with pneumonia, but I mean if there were something in her medical background that really was a debilitating issue. Let's say that she had already been diagnosed. I mean, this would be, I think, the sort of thing that people are talking about and is certainly a possibility. Let's just say that Hillary Clinton had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. I'm not saying she has, and I don't think she has, but I'm just playing this out. We're just kind of politically wargaming this a little bit. I think it would be almost impossible for her to stay in the race. So you would need something that would be of that level for her to drop out, because if it was anything that was manageable, if he's, I don't know, the diseases that affect the geriatric population that well, other than, the main heart disease, Alzheimer's, those sorts of things. If she had something that was manageable, she's not going to step out. Even if it comes out, she won't step down. No way. And it would have to be voluntary. She would have to agree to it. The DNC, as I understand it, because these think pieces have come out, does not have the authority to just say, sorry, Hillary, we're worried about this. We don't think it's going to happen. So see you later. And then put somebody else in there. It is my contention, this is one of these things where it's fun to put it forward because no one can prove me wrong unless this actually comes about. And I think the chances of it coming about are, I'd give it a 10% shot maybe. So not 0, not even 1%, but pretty small. If I told you had a 90% chance of sleeping, of waking up tomorrow morning and a 10% chance of not waking up tomorrow morning, you'd probably get a good night's sleep. I mean, not a great night's sleep, but you'd probably be okay. If I told you it was 50-50, that'd be pretty rough. So I think there's a 10% chance that Hillary would step out of this thing it would only be based on health concerns. It would have to be that she had something that normal people, no matter what they think of politics, would say you can't have that as you can't have that as somebody who's the commander in chief. That situation. That's unacceptable. Alzheimer's would be a great example of any sort of early stage dementia or, the things that older people deal with. I mean, it's very sad. And that's the other part of this, too, is that, if Hillary Clinton does have a serious illness or has been diagnosed with a serious degenerative illness, I mean, I actually would feel sympathy for the woman and her family, just as I would for anybody else. That's very tough stuff to deal with. But it's also not the kind of stuff you should deal with if you're going to be the leader of the free world. And there's too much at stake for this to be sort of a nostalgia-driven vote for Hillary, first woman, I am of the baby boomers, hear me roar. I mean, that's just not going to do it. That's not going to cut it. So I do think that if Biden were to step in for her, he would be a more effective candidate against Trump. There's not as much – this stuff with Hillary and the ethics and the emails and the lies – this is the reason why we have a tight race. If you had a likable, competent Democrat, I mean, Obama's approval right now is the highest it's been since basically the beginning when he took office, when a large portion of the country was just like in love with this guy. I mean, just, oh my God, he's so amazing. Obama's approval is the highest it's been since then, since 2008, I think, maybe early 2009. So Obama's doing, in terms of public approval, and I think it's because of what's going on right now in the campaign, partially, right? People are like, well, compared to these two, he's doing great. His vice president would therefore, I think, have a lot of momentum based on Obama as commander-in-chief and his approval rating if he were to replace him. So it's interesting because I see the sort of, I don't know, they're not the alt-right, but some of the more, I don't know what we call them, conspiratorial-minded right-wing sites and some of the, as well as straight-up news sites and everybody else talking about this too. But there seems to be this effort, this push underway to make everybody know that, or make everyone believe that Hillary is, for health reasons, unfit to be the next president of the United States. And I would just have to say about that issue, if you don't want a Democrat to win, I think Trump has a better shot against Hillary than he would against Hillary's replacement. I really do. I think Trump can beat Hillary at this point. And I've said that months ago. And of course, I've had moments of doubt. I'm not pretending that I've been a believer all along. I've certainly had days where I thought, wow. But, well, we'll get into more of that sort of in a second. I think there's a pause here while the media tries to figure out what the next move is going to be, and they're not sure about what that is. But we'll get back into that in a second. Sponsor this half hour, SilencerShop.com. Look, Silencer Shop offers the best buying experience, period. They have a friendly, knowledgeable staff. When it comes to doing the paperwork right for your silencer, you can trust SilencerShop.com. They've submitted more than 60,000 forms to the ATF in 2015, and Silencer Shop offers the best prices along with the best service. When shooting with a silencer, shooting becomes a more social sport. It's easier to communicate and enjoy the environment, and hunters often go without hearing protection because it's uncomfortable, it's annoying. A silencer from SilencerShop.com provides excellent hearing protection without being uncomfortable or impacting your outdoor experience. So look, you've got a lot to gain, nothing to lose. Go check it out. SilencerShop.com. Again, that is SilencerShop.com. Help make the world a quieter place, and we will be right back.
This is the Buck Sexton Show.
The Blaze Radio Network.
Buck Sexton.
I think that there's a little sense of certainly irritation and impatience from the media that they haven't been able to destroy Trump yet. It should be all over. I think they thought they were there a few weeks ago. I kind of mentioned this to you yesterday, but they've gone after him with such a ferocity, and there's been so much intensity in their hatred and venom for all things Trump that I'm a little surprised, I have to say, that, well, first of all, that things are as close as they are. Maybe part of that is that as the media is increasingly exposed as a partisan enterprise, and at this point, anyone who doesn't recognize that just either isn't paying attention or is not capable of figuring out these sorts of things. Don't know. I'm trying to say that as nicely as I can. And the trust in the media is very low. Remember that even when they're trying to have the appearance, oftentimes, of a nonpartisan approach or everything's supposed to be fine, the reality is that they're trying to please whatever they believe a majority of their audience is, as well as a majority of their anchors and journalists and producers. I'm talking about on the TV side, at least, who are all Hillary supporters. So this is oftentimes the way that these things are set up. One side's supposed to win. It's a rigged game, and maybe they have opposition there, but the opposition is going to be getting asked questions like, when did you stop beating your wife? That's the kind of stuff. Or when was the last time you beat your wife? That's the kind of stuff that they do to anybody who's a Republican these days who goes on TV and is a Trump supporter. If you're willing to bash Trump, they'll roll out the red carpet, they'll rub your shoulders, tell you you're great, you're brilliant, everything's fine. Okay, so that's a thing that's going on. But they now have to come up with a means of trying to finish this off because they know that Hillary can't do it herself. She's not a good campaigner. She's got so much baggage. The health issue is now in the realm of completely fair, open discussion. And anybody who says that it's sexist or whatever sounds like an imbecile, even to the left, I think, generally speaking, or to the Democrats in general. So that's going to continue to dog the campaign. They're going to have to come up with something. This is where you start to get into what about an October surprise of some kind, right? We are coming up here into October. It is the middle of September. What about an October surprise? Is there something that they could trot out about Trump that would be so damaging, that would destroy his character, that would destroy people's faith in him so much? I can't think of what that would be. They've been saying he's racist for so long, and they've repeated it so many times that I think it's started to lose its sting, or at least I think that the people who are going to be convinced Trump is a racist have been convinced already. I think the people who are convinced Trump is a sexist have been convinced already. And this is just my sort of anecdotal sense of things. I'm sure we could look at polling data. As you know, polls can be skewed. There are any number of ways to manipulate this stuff so that you get the data you want out of these things. But as I look at this, I don't see, I don't see the sort of finishing blow of the media here coming against the Trump campaign in any near-term sense at all. I just don't see it happening. They've tried. They've thrown everything and the kitchen sink at him, and it's still going on, which speaks to a few things. I mean, one, I think that trust in the MSM, I mean, everybody knows now, right? It should be, as I was saying before, everybody knows that the media is biased and that every single anchor you see on TV is pushing for one side or the other. There are no objective referees really in media. There are objective facts. There are no objective referees. Okay. There can be a scoreboard, but every referee in media is somebody who is pushing for one side or the other. Just some of us are honest about it with you and some of us aren't. But they have done everything in their power. I mean, they've set this whole thing up. They give so much airtime. I mean, they love to find the least articulate Trump supporter they can, someone who's out of his depth or will say things that are inflammatory, put him or her on TV, and then just watch the fireworks unfold, thinking that this would turn the country against this guy. And look, maybe it will. Maybe on Election Day we'll see that Trump is actually down 10 points or 8 points or something and just got completely creamed and lost all the major swing states. That still could happen. But based on everything we're seeing right now, it's not happening. And I have to say, going into the debate in less than 2 weeks, you've got to think the Trump campaign has the momentum. You watch these interviews with Kellyanne Conway and some of the other new Trump surrogates and spokespersons, and there is more discipline. Trump's comment yesterday about how he hopes Hillary sort of is convalescing and doing well, and that's not the Trump of 6 months ago. It may be a late pivot. We've been talking about the Trump pivot that would come, and I'm not saying that all of a sudden he's pivoted into being an honest and forthright guy that you can trust with the Constitution and everything else. But as a campaigner, you feel like there has been something of a shift right now, and the shift is reflected in the polling. And if he keeps this up, this could be a very tight race. Even without the campaign infrastructure that he has been told that he needs, even without the get out the vote effort, he might win.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
Hey team, it's Buck. Have you tried a Casper mattress yet? They are incredible. They're obsessively engineered, and they come at a shockingly fair price for a mattress that brings together technology and comfort to also be a great value is just too much for any of you to pass up. It combines springy latex and supportive memory foams to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right sink and the perfect bounce. Time magazine named it one of the best inventions of 2015. It is an award-winning mattress that absolutely will not disappoint. Try Casper for 100 nights risk-free in your own home. If you don't love it, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Free shipping and returns to the U.S. and Canada. And for listeners of this show, you can get a special $50 toward any mattress by going to Casper.com/Buck, Casper.com/Buck, and using Buck as the code. Terms and conditions apply.
This is the Buck
Sexton
Show.
Team, I want to know what you think about the Hillary health issue. If you have a theory, you want to share it, or if you just want to talk about how the media has covered it and all the rest of it. 888-900-3393. Phone lines are open. We are live. You can call in. Of course, you know we're live. It's how we roll in the Freedom Hut. You can call in, though, and we can chat about that by all means. And what else? There was something else I wanted to... Oh, there was an interesting little tidbit about the way... I think this is sort of a good general analysis of how people think of this election, or how the coverage of it works. So Rebecca Cinderbrand, who's a Washington Post political editor, tweeted, quote, Wolf Blitzer asking a question. Would you call David Duke deplorable, Mike Pence? I'm not in the name-calling business. That got 1,800 retweets. And then right after that, she tweeted, Pence noted that he and Trump reject David Duke's support. That received 36 retweets. So people just want to read, and they want to believe what they want to read, and they want to believe. That's nothing new, not surprising. In this election, it's being laid bare for all to see in a way that is particularly, I think, unseemly. By the way, also the corollary theory to my Biden would beat Trump if Hillary stepped down idea. And by the way, if you have an idea, if you have a sense of that, whether you agree or disagree, I'd be very curious to know what you think. Do you think Biden would beat Trump if he stepped in at this point? I think yes. I really do. Biden is, I know he's clownish and says dumb things sometimes, and people always pretend that he's like this sort of crazy fun uncle, but they'd say he has all this foreign policy experience and he's been in Washington forever, and he's a very sort of standard. If you want status quo without the scandal, you vote Biden. I mean, they could even make that the bumper sticker. If you want sort of more of the same from the government, from D.C. and if you want things to sort of run the way they've been running, the way Obama's been running them, and I know to you, you're like, ugh, terrible. But you got like 60% of the country that says that they like the way Obama's doing. So a lot of that is personality based. Clearly, Obama seems for a lot of people compared to Trump and Hillary, Obama seems incredibly charming and dignified and everything else. And I've always been willing to say the guy does, when he wants to play the role of very charming commander in chief, he does a good job. He gives a good speech. You have to be willing to acknowledge the strengths of your opponents, right? If you ever want to be able to deal with them successfully. And Obama's a good campaigner, and Obama gives good speeches. Enough of that Obama praise, Buck. Okay. So, I think Rubio or Cruz, I know, shed a tear, get sad with me now. Makes me sad on the inside, as I recently said on CNN. Shed a tear for Rubio or Cruz, or I don't think Kasich would win just because he's Kasich, although that's probably just me being bitter towards Kasich because, he's John Kasich. But I think that pretty much any of the other mainstream candidates, I don't think Bush would be able to beat Hillary just because it would turn into a George W. Bush versus Hillary thing, and it would just all be about the Iraq War. And I think the Bush political brand is really tarnished, and we saw all that. You'll also notice, by the way, there's not a lot of talk. The Democrats love to talk about big money in media, and there's not, or just money in general in elections. Sorry, not money in media. Money in elections. And Bush spent like $100-something million and got nowhere. This idea that a couple of shady corporations are going to write you some checks and then the American people are going to fall in love with you and that's going to control the elections is just nonsense peddled by the left. But it works for them for some reason because they don't think of themselves. They don't think of the Soroses, the Tom Steyers, the Bloombergs. They don't think of that as like money in politics. No, those guys don't count. They only think of the Koch brothers. So scary. All right. So that's my theory. My theory is that any of the sort of top five, I don't know, top 4 or 5 candidates in the Republican field against Hillary at this point, given what's all other things being equal, then I think it is very possible. What is it? Mutatis mutandis, right? All other things made the same. Then I think that it's very possible that we'd have a Republican kind of glide into the White House. It would be really easy. Not literally glide in, because if you try that, apparently you go to jail for a long time. But you know what I mean. It would not be a difficult path to the White House for a Republican candidate. All right, let's talk about the email server thing for a second. And I say that, and I've sort of not gotten into it right away because, look, this has become, in a sense, Benghazi-ified. And what I mean by that is that was so drawn out and the coverage of it was slow rolled by, the way they released the information. And by the time you get to congressional hearings, which is where we are right now with Hillary email, it's keeping it in the headlines, but there's also a cost to that because we're not learning anything new. Today you had a number of people involved with the server. What is it? You got Jason Chaffetz down on the Hill. He's saying that they're considering a full range of options because Brian Pagliano failed to attend the hearing and a couple of other witnesses pled the fifth. Or isn't pleaded the fifth? Isn't it? They pleaded the fifth. I don't think it's pled. What is that? The past pluperfect? I don't know. I can't remember all this grammar stuff. So yes, that they invoked. There we go. We can get around it. They invoked their Fifth Amendment right to avoid self-incrimination, and that's for people setting up Hillary's email server. So clearly, people who aren't Hillary know that they just don't want to talk about this. Because all that can do is cause problems for them and open them up. There we go. First siren of the day. There'll be more. There will be more. Hopefully nothing serious. In New York City, sometimes, obviously it ranges from the incredibly serious to somebody, lit off the smoke alarm in the office with the popcorn. So you never know what it is. But hopefully it's nothing serious. Where were we? Oh, yeah, the email server people. No benefit for them to speak whatsoever. Why would they do that? Why would they talk about this when all it can do is open them up to the sort of secondary charges that I think the FBI would kind of like, especially for the people setting up the IT, setting up the servers and people that aren't connected to the Clintons, they can be fed to the lions. If you were working for Platte River Networks, if you're somebody who was just sort of brought into this whole thing, they can... they can Scooter Libby you. They can find a way to get you on some thing you say that they say is untrue, and then they, what is it, Section 1001? Remember, Libby didn't divulge any information, didn't give anyone any name, but they said that he said he misremembered. They said he lied about a conversation, and they were going to throw him in federal prison, ruin his life for that. It was all political, by the way. It was a disgrace, and it was a disgrace that George W. Didn't pardon him. It's one of the things about W, because I generally would like to think of him as somebody of honor and integrity and decency, and he was guilty of cowardice on the Libby thing, because that guy got railroaded. I know all about that case. I know the details of that case. I know people who were close to and around that case, and it was a complete political hit job on. They were trying to get Cheney, by the way. That was what it was all really about, and it was sort of payback for the Iraq War stuff. It was just terrible, and the FBI found they had to get somebody. And that's where we are. They're not going to get Clinton. They're not going to go. We already know this. They're not going to go after any senior Clinton advisor. Huma Abedin is not going to be frog marched away from her desk in handcuffs. That's none of that is going to happen. Does not matter what is in the emails. Doesn't matter if Hillary sent the Chinese the nuclear codes and said, all good. I prefer a certified check in the mail for the Clinton Foundation. Here's our most sensitive. It doesn't matter. They will not charge her. Just flat out. Nothing that they can find, no corruption, no classified. There's nothing that they will uncover. And a lot of stuff, by the way, I think they still will just remember, they can just redact things and say it's for national security reasons. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's smoking gun corruption. We're all aware of that, right? That we're just relying on the State Department and the FBI and their word, which at this point, both of those institutions have been completely compromised. And that's not really a debatable proposition, in my opinion. Their ethics, their standards, their regulations have been compromised for the purposes of partisan politics. But they can hide stuff from the public just by saying that it's classified. They just black it out, say, oh, no, this is classified. And we assume, that must be really sensitive stuff. They've done it in over 100 emails, as you know, and more of the stuff that comes out they redact, or they redact it for privacy reasons. Maybe they're redacting it because it's smoking gun evidence of quid pro quo corruption, which I think we more or less already have. But you see what I'm saying. We're trusting in the investigators' integrity here when we know that their integrity has already been compromised. And this is the key point, if you are a lowly sort of servant of the Clinton enterprise, if you're not somebody that Hillary is going to be upset will be sent away, or really more to the point, if you're not somebody who would tarnish the Clinton brand and hurt her chances of becoming the next president of the United States, you're just the IT guy that was hired on some contract and you destroyed things, maybe you could get in trouble. And now keep in mind, the FBI gave immunity to Pagliano already to testify about this. And so now he's not testifying before Congress, and Congress is saying they're going to go after him, and they're going to turn this is going to turn into a partisan circus. And you know how all this is going to shake out, right? You're going to hear lots of angry speeches from what I think is Elijah Cummings on this on this committee. He's just going to go off on long monologues about how this is just all a partisan witch hunt, and you know how all this is going to go. But what's interesting about giving the IT guy immunity in this case is that the destruction of emails after a subpoena is in place, the knowingly and willfully destroying subpoenaed, that's a separate crime apart from all the classified, apart from everything else. So how would you justify not bringing those charges against somebody? Oh, well, you got to give that guy immunity. That's how you justify not bringing charges. They've covered all their bases. I mean, it's evil genius stuff that they've done here. It's devious but kind of brilliant in its own way. Where they had the discretion not to bring charges, they, of course, use that discretion to not bring charges. Where they would be incapable, really, of making a case that it's about discretion, right? Destruction of evidence is destruction of evidence. They give immunity. Well, isn't that cute? But maybe now that more people are being brought in under oath, there's always the possibility that somebody could get jammed up in this, and they would try to bring some, Mickey Mouse charge of lying about something that nobody cares about. And then they would say, well, see, there is accountability, but it wouldn't affect the Clintons. It wouldn't affect the inner circle. It wouldn't affect her White House chances. And you can just see it all playing out before you right now, which is, of course, why these people are all smart. They're smart to plead the fifth, to have pleaded the fifth. They're smart to have done so. And they should continue to do so. If they, assuming legally they can. I'm not counsel. I don't really know how this works exactly. I could speak to my lawyer sister about it. She'd tell me. So they're wise in that sense because they don't have, they're not Humo or Cheryl Mills or any others. They don't have the Clinton, shield of invincibility around them. One of them, I could see the FBI bringing some charge separate from mishandling of classified or anything, just some procedural charge in order to regain some of the dignity that they've completely abandoned to be part of the Hillary Express. So that's what I see here with this Clinton IT subpoena House hearing situation. We'll go into a break. We'll be right back.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
Dispensing the truth. This is Buck Sexton
on the Blaze Radio Network.
Well, doesn't this come at an interesting time, team? Reported in the Washington Post as well as many other sites. American incomes for the middle class rose in 2015 by 5.2%, which is the first time since the end of the Great Recession that there has been a real significant boost, and it's the fastest ever recorded by the federal government, according to the Census Bureau on Tuesday. Okay. Now, I'm really curious about this. Hold on. Let me just give you some more of these details. Real median household income was $56,500 in 2015, up from $53,700 in 2014. The gain was a combination of rising wages in the economy spurred by a labor market where unemployment is falling and employers are being forced to compete for more workers and low inflation. Okay, look, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say this anyway. We're supposed to believe that this information just happens to come out in September before the presidential election. All of a sudden, we have all this weak GDP growth and everything else, and no, this is This is just a gut feeling. Maybe you could even say I'm offering up some kind of a conspiracy here. Although we know, like, the way they count inflation is nonsense, right? Like, that's kind of crap. Those of you who buy groceries know that it's not really true. The basket they use to judge inflation is anyway not as effective as they pretend that it is. This just seems a little fishy to me. That's all. It just seems a little fishy. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying maybe it's not just the way that it is. But right when they need it, right when Hillary's having a rough one, all of a sudden, census data, they crunch it, and the government's annual report on income, and here we have it: middle class wages up middle class income up 5% plus. I guess Hillary's just real lucky. I guess she's lucky. All right, we've got more in hour 2. Stay with me.
The Buck Sexton Show.
only on the Blaze Radio Network. Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
All right, team, welcome to Hour 2 in the Freedom Hut. We're joined by Vince Colonese. He is the Daily Caller's executive editor. He is at the DC Vince on Twitter. What's up, Vince?
Hey, how you doing, Buck? Thanks for having me again.
Oh, thank you, sir. Good to have you. So you got an exclusive up on the Daily Caller. John Kerry's State Department funneled millions to his daughter's nonprofit. Oh, me, oh, my. What's going on?
Well, this is just one more one more story that somehow the State Department keeps on getting stuck with all of these corruption charges. But in this case, it's John Kerry, who did more than $9 million of State Department money, has gone through the Peace Corps and ended up in a nonprofit foundation started and run by his daughter. And, and this is something that was tracked down by the Daily Caller News Foundation. And, when they kind of went and asked a bunch of questions of everyone who was involved, everyone sort of denied wrongdoing. They were like, hey, there's no conflict of interest here. It's a great program. It's called the Global Health Service Partnership, which sends physicians and nurses to various third world countries. But in the process, there's many, many millions of dollars going to this group, straight from the State Department to the Peace Corps to this organization that is run by John Kerry's daughter. So, boy, don't you think that deserves scrutiny?
You would think so. What we keep seeing here is the Democrats, very powerful Democrats, either using government funds or using the guise of sort of charity and public works or public good work in order to move money around and enrich themselves. I mean, this is kind of out of the Clinton Foundation playbook. And everyone needs to understand that whenever money goes to a charitable organization, people at that charity are getting salaries. Sometimes they're getting, travel expenses paid to go to conferences all over the world. And only a percentage of that money is actually going to help anybody in the first place.
Right. So, and this comes on the heels of, people wonder why Donald Trump is succeeding. This comes on the heels of things like we saw over the past couple of years, the insider trading scandal in Congress, the notion that people with access, people with power, people with connections, people who use the resources of the federal government or who are charged with actually governing those resources, use them to their own benefit, whether it's a direct benefit or it's sort of, off to the side. You've even had, guys like Robert Menendez, who's clearly one of the most corrupt guys in the Senate, throwing softball questions to Hillary Clinton during questions that she has to face before Congress. So it's sort of amazing and actually upsetting that so many people are this close to apparent or perceived corruption, and now John Kerry and his daughter are in the thick of it, thanks to some great reporting by the Daily Caller News Foundation.
Where is Senator Menendez right now, by the way, on whether criminal charges are being filed? I actually haven't kept up as closely with that as I should have. Can you give us an update on that, or if not, I'll have our team look into it.
Nothing too detailed. I think Google's going to be your best bet here. But in general, the FBI report on this was very clear when it came out that they considered this to be pretty dramatic corruption. And this guy, up until a couple of years ago, was considered to be, that organization CREW, the Center for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, at one point ranked Robert Menendez among the most corrupt lawmakers in the country. And then all of a sudden, David Brock, the guy who runs Media Matters, took over CREW, and they memory hold all of that that past. So it really is amazing sort of what's gone on, not in just this election year, but the past couple of years when it comes to political corruption. It's bad, and I think Americans really need to pay attention to it.
And Catherine Watson, who's one of your reporters over at the Daily Caller News Foundation, has a piece up on how the FBI, this is all about these hearings that are going on about emails, the email server, email-gate, all that stuff. The FBI tried to recover 27 Clinton emails back from Congress. What happened here?
They basically, I guess, based on Congressman Chavitz's account, they said that they received 27 emails more than they should have, I guess, that the FBI had control of. And then the FBI realized that they had not wanted to send those specific 27 emails to Congress, and they were asking for them back. And I don't even know what the point is. Chaffetz said that this wasn't about classified material at all. It was just, I guess it was routine. Chaffetz called it embarrassing material, but they basically asked for documents back. And, even at the news level, at the Daily Caller, we've been given documents by the government before and then like some government agency, and then they'll later be like, hey, we didn't want to give you all of that. Can you give it back to us? And we're like, oh, don't be ridiculous. These are records that you had and you were in control of. And, if you want us to issue some redactions because you can come up with some personally identifiable information deserving of them, fine. We can negotiate that. But we're not going to give bad documents back to you. Don't be silly.
No, this is the way the government does things. They will confirm things publicly. They'll have the commander-in-chief confirm things and then say, well, that's still classified. And you're like, but the president said it.
Totally. It happens all the time. They're incompetent in the distribution of information. They're just, so it's a big government. A lot of people make mistakes, but we're on the favor of transparency. We'd like to know more, not less.
Where is the caller right now on the issue of Hillary's health? I mean, look, we know that she's got pneumonia. That all looked bad. Do you have people looking into this? Do you think there's more to this? Because this seems to be catching on well beyond the sort of fever swamps of the right-wing sites into just, no, there's some stuff going on here.
Here's the thing I'll say, and this is the way that we feel at the Daily Caller. It's one thing to sort of be presented with a series of facts by like a presidential campaign in a vacuum. Hey, if they say, hey, our candidate's got pneumonia, okay, that's pneumonia. That makes sense. We'll report it. Hillary Clinton has pneumonia. The problem is that the lead up to us finding out that specific thing was involved. There was so much deception and silence that once you get to actually like starting to reveal what's really going on, any good reporter at that point should be like a little bit stung by the fact that they've been crying wolf throughout the whole process and go, okay, look, I really want to believe you, but you've been so dishonest in your presentation the entire time about what's going on with Hillary Clinton. And now yesterday, all of a sudden, Bill Clinton and others are saying, actually, pneumonia is sort of just a minor ancillary problem. It wasn't that. It was that she's always dehydrated. She just doesn't drink water enough. What am I supposed to believe? So as a reporter, and the reporters here at the Daily Caller, all we can do is sort of like tug on this and keep asking questions about it and try and report out as much as possible. The New York Post yesterday had this piece saying that the Secret Service violated protocol and by not bringing her to a level 1 trauma center when she collapsed and instead bringing her to Chelsea's apartment. I put a call into the Secret Service. They're not really willing to talk about this anymore other than to say that they were fine sort of with their agent's behavior over the weekend. And they thought, everything was sort of executed as it should have been, but they have no further comment. And, from my perspective, there's just so many more questions than there are answers involved in this, which seems so silly, right?
Do we have the audio, John, of everyone saying how Hillary had to power through this? Do we have that? John? No. Yeah. Just play it. Play. This is like Robbie Mook, I think, talking about how Hillary powered through. Go for it.
Why not tell the American people on Friday that she had pneumonia?
Well, Jake, she met with her doctor. She made a decision to just power through this. As your opening segment mentioned, a lot of people here on the campaign have been sick the last few weeks, and we've decided to power through sometimes to our own detriment. She was diagnosed with pneumonia on Friday. She decided to power through it. As I said, on Friday, she made a decision with her doctors to just power through this.
But why wouldn't you tell the voters? Do you think the voters don't have a right to know?
Well, I think, look, obviously pneumonia is more serious than a cold or a flu, but people often go into work and continue to power through when they have pneumonia. Yes, she developed pneumonia. Yes, she tried to power through it. But it's not, let's hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire.
I do not believe, for somebody who this is a guy who makes his living going on TV and elsewhere and speaking, right? Communication is what this person does. I do not believe for a second that he's that at a loss for words, that he just has to say power through, like, what was that, 7 times in a row in one interview?
No.
If I said it twice, I would think it was weird. They might as well have said Hillary had pneumonia, but she decided that we're stronger together. So we were just going to be stronger together while she had pneumonia and be stronger together after the pneumonia passed. I mean, that's what's going on there.
You know that they had some hilariously corny PR meeting that morning. It was like, hey, okay, everyone who talks about this in public, we need to say power through. Those are the words of the day today, power through. Because the idea is like, they're like, okay, we need to make her appear as strong as possible, right? That she's like suffering with this, but she's powering through. She's got so much hard work to do for the American people that not even a mortal illness can slow this woman down. And I mean, the same thing is true, by the way, of the water thing. She's so busy that she doesn't even have time to drink water. What are you talking about? By that definition, Marco Rubio would be the worst president of the United States because he just constantly drinks water, right? So he would just never have time to actually govern because of all of his water consumption.
You see how lazy Rubio is? The guy drinks water left and right. It's crazy. No, I mean, but this is also, by the way, I think people, when they stop and give it a moment's consideration, recognize that, I mean, Hillary Clinton travels everywhere and has now for decades with essentially an army of servants. I mean, there are people tending to her every single need. She's incredibly wealthy. Clinton wrote in lifetime, full-level Secret Service protection for him and for her at a level that's, I believe, even beyond like what George W. has. So he sort of changed that so that they would have the full complement of Secret Service agents in perpetuity. And this notion that, she's powering through anything. And what's so hard? Getting driven around, getting in a private jet? I mean, the rest of the American people should be so lucky.
Right. Yeah. They're prone to hilariously bad hyperbole, like the idea that they were dead broke upon leaving the White House and all of a sudden just came into many, 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 many millions of dollars. So I think the biggest problem here is in addition to whatever the answers are on the health question, the fact is, as I said before, the sort of the dishonesty and the veiling and the bias for secrecy that exists among the Clintons and specifically Hillary. It's just it doesn't seem like we can get through a single news cycle without there being, is Hillary telling us the full truth? So I mean,
well, one thing that sort of sticks in my mind though is everyone keeps saying that she has this penchant for secrecy or she's compulsively secretive, as though it's just sort of a personality quirk. She has a penchant for secrecy because she's had a lot of stuff to hide. That's just the other part.
Right. Exactly. And that's why I think voters are suspicious. I mean, some voters are suspicious when anyone who has that nagging bias for secrecy is definitely hiding something, or seems to be. This notion that, especially when it comes to the relationship between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department, boy, they have a lot of questions to answer. She's top-level aides who are facilitating meetings for donors to the Clinton Foundation directly with the State Department. Those questions need to be answered. And all of this sort of pretending, not just from in the Clinton campaign, but in the press at large, that the email scandal, for instance, has been blown out of proportion. I've never thought that. I've never once been like, oh, we've totally overdone coverage of this email scandal. Not even close.
No, I mean, you'd think that you think that an FBI investigation of a presidential candidate would be big news no matter what the situation was, never mind if it involved national security information while the candidate was Secretary of State. Anyway, it's just, Trump University is going to lead to nuclear war, but Hillary's private server while she's Secretary of State is an overblown story. I mean, that's kind of that's the takeaway that I think you're supposed to get from the media. But Vince, I know you and the rest of the folks, the Daily Caller and Daily Caller Foundation, are on it. So thank you for all your good work. Stay on it. Let us know what's going on. Come back soon. Vince Colanese, everybody, executive editor of the Daily Caller. Great to have you, sir. Talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Buck.
888-900-3393 on the phone lines. We've got a lot more show coming. Stay with me.
This is the Buck Sexton Show
on the Blaze Radio Network. The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
Some of you will recall Katie Couric, formerly huge news anchor person, now currently struggling for relevance in an era when having a certain smile and reading off a prompter no longer entitles you to the public's complete and utter attention and $20 million a year in salary. Unbelievable what these people used to make. Some of them still do, but it's just astonishing. People say, oh, Buck, that's what the market will bear. It's not really what the market will bear. It's what the system will bear. You could replace any number of these anchors, and have, by the way, and there have been plenty of cases that I know of where a very highly paid anchor is replaced with somebody who's paid a lot less and the ratings go up, right? So this is not – there's so few people actually get a real shot at this stuff that there's really – the market is whatever – the executives at these major legacy media companies say it is, right? Whatever they pay you what they want to pay you, and that's what you're worth. Because any one of them are replaceable, and I find you've noticed I just have a complete and utter disdain for most big fancy pants TV journalists who can't write, don't know anything about anything, have no experience other than getting makeup and hair done and looking into a camera for a long time, are partisans pretending not to be, are self-obsessed, narcissistic, and horrible. That's generally the case. Okay, so she did some documentary on gun rights groups, on guns, rather, and a Virginia gun rights group that had some members that were portrayed. You guys remember this? This was the scene where she asks them a question for this Under the Gun documentary that Epix put out there. She asked them a question, and this was how it was portrayed in the actual film as released. Play the audio, please.
Let me ask you another question. If there are no background checks for gun purchasers, how do you prevent felons or terrorists from purchasing a gun?
There's silence while they look around looking stupid. That's. Oh, but wait a second. They edited that because in the real interview, right away, they start to answer her question. First of all, it's an idiotic question because it's like saying, but what would we do if there weren't laws that stopped people from selling heroin? Wouldn't people be buying heroin? It's like, but there are laws that stop people. Just like, what do you mean? What would stop a felon without background checks from? There are background checks for felons, and felons aren't allowed to buy a gun under any circumstances anyway. That's already illegal. So, what is your point? How do you stop somebody illegal who can't own a gun legally from illegally buying a gun? Well, it's already illegal. So it's just an idiotic question to ask in the first place. It just shows these people. Remember, guns in this country are largely, especially for media elites. And others have started to catch on to this more. I'm hearing others that say this. I'm not saying they heard it here first, but I've been a big proponent of this. It's just about not liking people who own guns. It really has very little. It has very little to do with gun violence. It's a big virtue signaling bonfire of vanities. It's a big, oh, look at me. I'm not one of those toothless, inbred hillbillies that, owns a shotgun and believes in the Second Amendment and the Constitution and stuff like that. I'm a fancy cosmopolitanist who watches, NBC News or something, right? That's what, for a lot of people, opposition to guns is really about. And the moment you start to talk to them, they go into this sort of derangement of, but, well, you must support gun violence. Like, no one supports gun violence. Nobody. That's a stupid position. But they're forced into stupidity because they haven't really thought through the issue. It's just about how the issue makes them look. By the way, this also translates, this same basic idea translates to the Hillary Clinton campaign, which is, why vote for Hillary? Because of what it says about you. It has nothing really to do for a lot of people with what Hillary Clinton will accomplish as president and everything else. It's just that smart people supposedly vote for Hillary Clinton. That's all it really is. That's all there is to say about it. That's if they can convince smart and cool people, and if they can convince enough Americans of that, they win. Just like with guns, if they can convince, and people like Katie Couric can convince you that having a gun, owning a gun, supporting gun rights makes you a bad, stupid person, well, people won't necessarily sit and take the time to read and learn about issues of firearms and the Second Amendment and everything else that goes along with it in this country. They just go, oh, I want to be one of the smart people. Just like with global warming / climate change / climate disruption. These are all the same. You see these same memes playing out time and again. The same themes, I should say, playing out time and again. So this gun rights group is suing Katie Couric for $12 million because of that deceptive edit in the documentary. That's the headline here. I don't think they'll get $12 million, but I'm glad they're annoying her.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show, only on the Blaze Radio Network.
Our guest now is John Fund. He's a columnist for National Review. John, thank you for calling in.
Pleasure, Buck. Thank you.
Column up on National Review right now. What would you do to save your child's life? John, you talk about the government's idiotic rules on bone marrow donation and how it may be killing thousands each year. What's going on here?
It's unbelievable that 30 years ago Congress passed the National Organ Donor Act, and what it said was it made a bright line between being able to pay people for organs that weren't renewable, things like kidneys, things like hearts, and people being compensated for things that are renewable, things like blood transfusions. And what happened at the last minute when Congress did this is they included bone marrow in the list of donations that couldn't be compensated for, even though bone marrow is basically just a fancy form of blood transfusion, and it's easily renewable. Somebody who donates bone marrow only loses their time. It replenishes itself. So right now, there's a law that says you can be prosecuted and put into prison for 5 years if you offer someone money for a bone marrow transplant, and that's tragic because 20,000 Americans a year have blood diseases that can be treated with bone marrow. And what happens if they don't get the bone marrow from a family member, because only 30% of people who need bone marrow have a family member that's compatible? They have to go on a registry list waiting for somebody to donate marrow, and about 2,000 to 3,000 people a year die because they don't get to the top of the list. So what is happening now, a group called the Institute for Justice, which is a group of pro bono lawyers in Washington, are suing the government saying, look, you got to stop this. And in fact, they even have a court order telling the government, look, there's no difference between blood and bone marrow. Don't make the difference. Change your laws. Change your regulations. And the Department of Health and Human Services refuses to do anything. Therefore, it's still illegal to give bone marrow and offer anyone any compensation for their time and their trouble.
Is this just pure bureaucratic intransigence from HHS, or do they offer up some explanation for why they wouldn't do it? I mean, I'm sure everyone listening is like, this is an easy call. Well, why aren't they making the easy call?
3 years ago, in response to a federal court decision saying they had to change their regulation, Health and Human Services issued its own regulation saying, well, we're going to still make it illegal. They have never implemented that. If you call them up, they just say it's under consideration. They won't give you any other reason. So in other words, the government's a black box. They won't tell you what they're going to do. They won't tell you if they're going to do it, and they won't tell you why they're not going to do it.
Well, John, if I could switch gears for a second, speaking of black boxes, I'll use that as a segue into the latest with the servers, the Clinton email situation, and people who have set it up. They have these hearings going on right now or they have been going on at least this morning down on Capitol Hill. Got a couple of people who have pleaded the fifth. You also have one individual, Pagliani, who didn't even show. What do you make of all this, and is this going to make a difference?
Well, Brian Pagliano and one of the employees from Platte River Networks, which was the private company that had Clinton's server, have been given immunity by the federal government, which means they don't have any criminal exposure. And you're only supposed to use the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination if you're exposed to possible criminal liability. So they're in the bizarre situation of refusing to answer questions before Congress, even though they've gotten immunity from the Justice Department. They just don't want to tell the truth 7 weeks before the presidential election. I think it's a form of stonewalling, which would make Richard Nixon proud.
Can they do that, though? I've never thought of this. I've never been faced with this problem before. So if you've been given immunity, you can still take the fifth because maybe they would say that you'd go outside. It's theoretically possible that they could go outside their immunity?
No, you can't take the fifth, but that has to be adjudicated in court. That takes time, maybe more than 7 weeks, if you see my point. In other words, you can make a preposterous legal argument, but you have to go to court to get that argument overturned. So by refusing to answer questions before Congress, Congress has to go to a court. Well, that takes time, maybe after the presidential election. And then, to paraphrase Hillary Clinton, what difference does it possibly make?
Yeah, it will make none for her. We all know that. And everybody who would be in a position to hold her accountable for any of this after the election is going to realize that she's their new boss. And having worked in the federal government, I can tell everybody listening that you don't mess with the boss.
She runs the FBI. She runs the IRS. Go talk to the hand.
Yeah, there's going to be nothing that comes of that at all. By the way, Teneo, John, have you done any writing on Teneo, the sort of spin-off consulting firm from the Clinton Foundation? I just bring it up because I'm seeing today it's being reported that they're looking for $1 billion IPO.
Oh, this is Doug Band's group.
Yes, Doug Band's consulting to now, yeah.
That's right. Doug Band was a big wheel in the Clinton Foundation, and he was basically the ambassador between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department. Look, my view on this has always been it is a three-ring circus here. You had Huma Abedin working at the State Department, getting money from the Clinton Foundation at the same time, and also as a consultant to Teneo, which is a private for-profit group. None of that can ever end well. And we haven't gotten to the bottom yet of what's happening. We do know, just out today, that a Malaysian company was seeking favors from the State Department, and that someone from the Clinton Foundation was asking for meetings at the State Department at the same time that this Malaysian company was helping Bill Clinton with large fees for serving as an advisor to some university there. This is yet another example of how Hillary Clinton apparently opposed the privatization of every government agency except the State Department, and that she obviously wanted merged immediately with the Clinton Foundation.
I think one thing that's hard for a lot of people who either don't cover this as a journalist or haven't worked inside the federal government to, well, it's not that it's hard to comprehend, but it's just not something that comes to mind quickly, is that there are all kinds of ethical constraints and obligations, and I had to fill out stuff about my finances and my background. I mean, continuously while you're at the CIA, they have all sorts of information they want about you, and other federal government agencies. You have to find all these financial disclosures, and this is basic federal stuff. And for a lot of places, for outside employment, if I wanted to be tutoring English on the weekends, I would have had to get permission. Now, usually for some small things like that, they would say okay. But for anything where there's even the possibility of an appearance of a conflict of interest, or that I would interfere with your job, or that it just doesn't even reflect well on the agency, John, it's a flat no right out of the gate every single time, unless you happen to work for Hillary Clinton. That's the way that it seems to be.
Well, it's a tale of two standards, and it's that simple. Now, here's why it matters to your audience. We right now, Buck, have all the evidence in the world, from the health scare, from the emails, from the Clinton Foundation, from all of her past dealings during the time she was First Lady, going all the way back to cattle futures, et cetera, and Whitewater. We have all the information we need to know about how Hillary Clinton would operate in office. If Hillary Clinton is elected in November, it will be the equivalent of the American people in 1972 electing Richard Nixon president, knowing everything about Watergate beforehand.
And isn't there some weird irony to the fact that Hillary's really one of her earliest political activities was trying to get Nixon impeached? This feels almost like Greek tragedy.
Actually, not quite. In fact, it turns out that what she was doing on the Senate Impeachment Committee was her job was a partisan one. It was to drag in all of the appointees of the Nixon administration, especially people just beginning their career, and smearing them with Watergate, even if they had nothing to do with it, and making sure that their political careers would end here and now because they would have been tainted with Watergate. So she was in charge of defenestrating, of wiping out a whole generation of Republican and conservative political appointees. That was her job on the committee.
John, before we let you go, do you think that there has been a shift in the Trump campaign that's making them more competitive, or is this just a blip on the screen and we're about to see the Hillary rocket ship take off?
Well, I don't think it can take off as long as she has pneumonia. She's off the campaign trail and recovering. I think the Trump campaign is still a mess. It's still got problems, but it's stabilized. And the point is, Buck, this race is very simple. If this race is more about Donald Trump's mistakes and his problems, he loses. If it's more about Hillary Clinton's mistakes and her problems, she loses. It's that simple. We're in a race to the bottom, and it will just depend on what image Hillary's problems or Trump's problems are in the minds of the independent voters who are going to decide this election.
John Fund, columnist for National Review. Thanks so much for calling in, John. Great to talk to you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Buck.
Team, the phone lines are open, 888-900-3393. We will go into a break, and then we will be right back.
Buck Sexton on the Blaze Radio Network. The Buck Sexton Show.
Team, I asked our friend there, John Fund, about Teneo, which is this consulting group that was set up by Doug Band, who's a very close Clinton associate. Bill Clinton's surrogate son is or not surrogate son, whatever they call him, sort of almost like his son, whatever. They set this thing up, and it used all of their sort of connections and all the Clinton tie-ins, and you really have to this is part of the problem with a lot of this Clinton Foundation stuff and the stories, and you got to really get into the details, because the Clintons have, through decades of doing this kind of stuff, managed to just expand and retreat into and utilize the gray areas and twist things, and just they are so good at obfuscating, at muddying the waters, at creating these sorts of murky circumstances, ethical gray areas, and all this other stuff. And with the Clinton Foundation business that they were running, especially when you add in Teneo, so they have people who are, so Teneo is a consulting group that essentially promises, started by people who are all tied into the Clinton Foundation, and it's promises to offer up advice to sort of top CEOs and such. And some people pay up to $250,000 a month retainer. That's a lot of money in order to have access to Teneo's expertise. Sometimes more than that. It's a, quote, one-stop shop, according to Politico, for C-suite consulting, a blend of public relations advice for CEOs and more technical investor relations work. And they also get to hang out with the former president, with Bill Clinton. So there's a bunch of things tied in here. There's, of course, the celebrity of the Clintons, which is always for sale. There's the access that the Clinton Rolodex brings, and everybody who's sort of tied into that brings with them. And they also used this consulting arm as a means of funding the Clinton Foundation, because they meet people through the foundation, right? And they say, hey, come to my big charity party. At the charity party, they go, oh, you're a big fancy person with deep pockets. I've got an idea. Why don't you hire Doug Band and his associates at Teneo? They would be great. And, oh, by the way, Doug is really tied in with all of us. And everybody who's, a Clinton Foundation donor or involved with the Clinton Foundation, we can put you in touch with, and this is selling access, right? And then that person says, oh, okay, cool. And then also, by the way, to add on top of that, the Clinton Foundation people, who in some cases work both for Teneo and the Clinton Foundation. I know this is kind of getting into this stuff, but this is important. This matters. Will say, oh, and by the way, it would be great if you gave a donation to the foundation, too. That would really raise your profile among the kind of people that we will, once you pay for Teneo services, put you in touch with. I mean, it's just one big circle of passing around the money. That's what they're doing here. It's just all self-reinforcing enrichment and enrichment of the Clintons and their cronies, expansion of the Clinton brand. It leverages a charity for private ends. It leverages private ends for charity. It's just the whole thing. It leverages the State Department for both. I mean, the whole thing was set up to do this. And when you start to get into this, you look at the consulting fees, and Bill is sort of honorary chairman of this and that. These are just methods of paying people and pretending it's not a bribe, or pretending you're not paying for access or favors. I mean, Bill Clinton's consulting. What do people really think a Bill Clinton consulting session is worth? I mean, what is he consulting on exactly? Jason from D.C. wants to weigh in. What's up, Jason? Been a while.
Hey, Buck. How you been?
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to focus in on the fact that, it's interesting. We constantly talk about, what the political campaign positions are. But if you're dealing with dishonest people, then there should be no assumption that any of their positions will ever be followed through or should be believed.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm sitting here, Hillary Clinton comes out. Obviously, she's going to lie about having pneumonia or being, obviously it's not like they're hiding cancer or something. What won't they hide? Emails was, That's magnitudes much more than your candidate's got pneumonia.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So
at some point, right? If you've got a
restriction.
bunch of kids playing soccer, and one kid decides that he's going to start using his hands and pick up the ball and run with it, and then a couple of other kids grab it from him and do the same thing. Now that's what everybody's doing. So now we can keep talking about how the rules say you can only use your feet, you can't use your hands. But if enough people use their hands, the rule kind of is meaningless. And the idea that there'll be any requirement of truth in this political campaign, I think it's turned into like kids using their hands in soccer. It's sort of beyond. That ship has left the dock.
Yeah, and it certainly is not going to affect at least voting totals for either one of the candidates, because what it seems like is I have yet to hear people argue that they like Clinton without mentioning, but she's not Trump, and people for Trump who are saying it's not Clinton. Nobody's voting for anybody. They're all voting against something.
Yeah, it's like the integrity apocalypse.
You're listening to Buck Sexton on the Blaze Radio Network. Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
All right, welcome to Hour 3 today on The Buck Sexton Show. We're joined by Jay Solomon. He's a Wall Street Journal reporter and author of the new book, Iran Wars, The Iran Wars. Jay, great to have you back.
Great. Thanks. Good to be here.
So, Jay, $400 million transferred in cash to Iran. You were part of breaking that story for the Wall Street Journal. Now we find out it wasn't actually just $400 million. Administration sent $1.3 billion. What is this all about?
I mean, it was all part of the settlement that the administration made in January for an arms deal that went bad, basically almost 40 years earlier with the administration, with the Iranian government at the time of the Islamic Revolution. The problem really is there was just so much secrecy about this payment, and then the fact that it went in cash has just caused this furor in Congress, because a country like Iran that moves so much money to military proxies, terrorist organizations across the Middle East, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Assad regime in Syria, giving them that access to that much cash, there's just a real outstanding question of where did this money go, who exactly on the Iranian side picked it up, and what was done with it. And the fact that this $1.7 billion literally was all in cash, it's just no one can remember a time the United States has ever transferred that much money to another government, let alone one that's accused of being a state sponsor of terrorism.
What can you say to somebody who would raise the question right away? Well, does it matter if it's an electronic funds transfer or if it's cash? What's the response to that?
Yeah, it matters. I mean, it matters because Iran is, despite the nuclear agreement reached last year, is still heavily sanctioned, but so are all of its allies, whether the U.S. has draconian sanctions on the Syrian regime, expansive sanctions on Lebanon, on Hezbollah in Lebanon, on some of these Shiite militias fighting in Iraq. You send cash instead of a wire transaction, it just makes it so much easier for the Iranian military, elite military unit, the Revolutionary Guard, to move money around. There was a case in 2011 where the FBI accused the Iranians of plotting to assassinate the Saudi ambassador in downtown Washington. The reason that case was basically picked up was that they could see wire transfers going on between the Iranian government and agents that it was using to execute this plot. So it's just, when you're dealing with cash, it's much harder to track money, and it makes it much easier for groups like the Revolutionary Guard to run money. And it's still really hard to tell if the White House really even needed to do it. They said additionally, well, there are all these sanctions, but then we've learned in recent weeks that there were actually legal options for the White House to try to transfer this money electronically if it wanted to through some other central bank in Europe.
So this makes it sound more like the Iranians said, oh, no. We only take, like, they're the restaurant that only takes cash, no credit cards. And the administration said, oh, okay, fine, whatever you guys want.
I mean, that's what it seems like. There was a really contentious hearing last week in Washington where administration officials now their refrain is, well, we had to use cash to get it there expeditiously, which made it, and the Iranians had all these economic problems, so we wanted to get it there expeditiously. So yeah, there's still, this question on why they had to move cash, that there probably were legal mechanisms that would allow them to deliver this money differently. And I still think the main question that is unclear is who picked up this money in this $400 million in Geneva, who picked up another $1.3 billion that the U.S. sent to Iran via the Central Bank of the Netherlands. All the administration has said was that a central bank official was in these countries, a central bank official of Iran to kind of oversee the money. But as someone who's watched the Iranians pretty clearly, the central bank is not going to kind of.
I don't know if you moved away from a window or something, but it sounds like the Iranians are trying to break up your comms there. So if you could try to get back to where we were a second ago, we were hearing you loud and clear, but it got a little fuzzy there for it.
Is that better?
Yeah, there we go. That's gotten better. By the way, on the notion that the administration did the American taxpayer a huge favor here, which of course is kind of funny in and of itself, but because we were going to lose so much more at The Hague, doesn't that also sort of create problems for the narrative that this was money that was owed? No, it was still a legal proceeding. We could have fought this out at The Hague. This wasn't money that was necessarily owed to Iran. And also, what mechanisms would the Iranians have, even if it was owed, to get it from us, other than seizing hostages, which means it is a ransom?
No, that Hague process is very unclear. It's been hard as a journalist to try to figure out exactly how they knew they were going to lose. They said, well, we think there were going to be proceedings, and we were pretty sure we were going to lose, and we were going to lose big to the tune of billions of dollars. That's still kind of a he says, she says. We don't really know that's true. What's also interesting is this $400 million that was sitting there. It turns out there has been legal kind of fights over that money for at least 15 to 20 years. Families of U.S. nationals who were killed in terrorist attacks were initially trying to get that money as basically to cover legal cases they had won against Iran. But the U.S. government had kind of protected that money or said it didn't exist, or that there was no interest-bearing element to have made it more than $400 million. But then all of a sudden, they paid out that money and said, well, in fact, there was interest-bearing arrangement on that. So even whose money it was initially is much murkier than it was originally described, because there are so many claimants in this country on Iranian funds because of whether it was the attack in Lebanon in '83 or terrorist attacks in Palestine. The question of whose money it was is very complicated.
And the Iranians have been acting up recently. There was just a report on Fox News over the weekend that the Iranians threatened to shoot down a U.S. plane that was in international airspace, military plane that was in international airspace. They've been doing these sort of close runs to U.S. ships near the Straits of Hormuz. Is this just all domestic political consumption stuff for the Iranians trying to look tough against the great Satan? Is this in response to the weakness of the Obama administration? I mean, how do you assess that? You've just written this book, The Iran Wars. What's Iran up to right now?
I mean, it is interesting that the amount of kind of encounters in the Gulf has really spiked up. My reading on this is kind of the Iranians are trying to look tough going into both the U.S. political cycle and the Iranian political cycle. The Iranian President Rouhani, who's seen as kind of a relative moderate, is up for election early to mid next year, and there's all sorts of kind of jousting inside that political system. But I also think going into our system, whether it's Hillary Clinton, who's actually struck a pretty tough line on Iran over the years, and then Donald Trump, my sense is that the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are kind of flexing their muscles and saying, we had this agreement, but anyone who thought there would be some sort of rapprochement between the U.S. Iran during the Obama administration. That is definitely not happening. We're continuing to shoot missiles. We're continuing to export our revolution and to try to dominate the Gulf. So I think it's signaling. It's interesting. Next week, President Obama is giving his last speech at the UN General Assembly in New York, and the administration had hoped for a couple of years now that there'd be some sort of direct meeting between Obama and the Iranian President Rouhani, but I've been told it's just not going to happen. The Iranian president would see a meeting with Obama as giving his detractors back in Tehran a lot of ammunition. So for his own sake, he's not doing it, but that kind of tells you something about the state of the relationship.
And it seems like this has been going on for a few years in the cases I'll raise, but certainly there's been no cessation, no change at all in Iranian intervention in the Middle East, military interventions. I mean, they have spread themselves out into a number of conflicts directly, including sending IRGC members and as well as supporting Shia militias in Iraq. I mean, they have actual boots on the ground in Syria. They're helping out the Houthis in Yemen. The Iranians have a very active and, dare I say, activist revolutionary foreign policy that they're executing despite the agreement and all of the supposed rapprochement that's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the book has been really looking at U.S. foreign policy with Iran since 9/11 and how that's impacted what the Iranians have been doing. I think the book is pretty critical of both the Bush and Obama administrations. The invasion and overthrow of Saddam Hussein was a big gift to the Iranians who, fought an 8-year war with Saddam and saw his removal as basically unshackling a population that's 60-70% Shiite. Iran is a Shiite-dominant country, so that war really helped Iran kind of push itself into Iraq. They had already had deep relationships with the Assad regime and the Lebanese militia Hezbollah, but I also really documented in the book, particularly last year when there was all these negotiations on the nuclear issue, there was a hope that this would give some momentum to cooperation between the U.S. and the Russians and the Iranians in ending the Syrian civil war. But the book really documents that even as the negotiations were continuing, Iran and the Russians were sort of behind the Americans' back, plotting this very sophisticated military operation where the Russians have supplied the air power and the Iranians a lot of the ground forces. And in recent days, there's been an announcement of a ceasefire. There's a lot of speculation that it won't hold, but it's amazing to see where the Obama administration is now. From a few years ago saying Assad must go, they're now supporting a process that it basically will bolster him. It's the only groups inside Syria that are really being targeted now are either ISIS or rebel groups that the U.S. initially was trying to help. So you've seen a complete kind of 180, if not a 360, by the U.S. policy in a way that is now basically supportive of the Iranian and Russian position.
Assad's not going anywhere, right? I mean, there's no reason to believe that Assad is on his heels and the regime is going to crumble anytime soon. It looks like Assad has pulled off what a couple of years ago would have seemed almost miraculous, which would be taking back a lot of territory. He now has strong international partners that, as you say, are providing air cover, providing ground troops. Assad has beaten back the revolution that was going to topple him and all of its little factions.
No, he has. I mean, it is interesting. Early last year, I think the Iranians and the Russians were having secret meetings at the Kremlin, where I think they really thought Assad could be on the ropes. The rebels were moving towards the Mediterranean coast, could possibly have encircled Damascus, and that's when you saw this intervention. Now, there's no real talk in the U.S. anymore of he must go, of regime change. It's more of some sort of political transition of which Assad could be part of it. And for him, he gave a speech this week where he basically was telling even the Russians who said there had been some ceasefire that no, his forces were going to reclaim every bit of territory in Syria, and there's been continued barrel bombing of the city of Aleppo, which is the largest city in Syria. So, yeah, for a guy who had very few cards to play, whose sect, this Alawite Islamic sect is about 12% of the population. The fact that now there's very little, there's really little signs that this guy's going to go anywhere soon. You're right. It's a miraculous turnaround, but it's not the best statement on where the global community stands right now. We're a government that gassed its own people, that's killed. The numbers are from 300,000 to 500,000 people. The fact that guy's going to stay in power for the foreseeable future is not going to bring stability to that part of the world.
Last one for you, Jay, before we let you go. Is Iran in its most powerful geostrategic position now in the post-9/11 era?
I mean, I think in the post-9/11 era, probably. I mean, Iran has been very adept at using asymmetrical warfare and militias and other tools to sort of project itself as we've been describing. At the same time, its economy is not in great shape. And to think Iran is going to be some superpower in a lot of ways when its economy is in such bad shape is not going to happen either. So I guess it really depends on how you see it. If you're the supreme leader of Iran and you want to try to spread this revolution and you are in a conflict with the Saudis and the Americans for regional power, yeah, you've played your cards pretty well. If you're an Iranian citizen who wants, their country to have access to the West, have access to technology and sort of an open, modern economy, you're not liking where the country is headed, because in some ways I think the nuclear agreement will entrench this regime for a bit longer than maybe it would have otherwise, and that's not going to be great for the citizens of that country.
Jay Solomon is a Wall Street Journal reporter and author of The Iran Wars, available now on Amazon. Jay, great to have you on. Thanks for your time today.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
All right, team, we've got more. Stay with me.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network. This is the Buck Sexton Show.
Team phone lines are open, 888-900-3393. This is I'm trying to figure out this. Ryan Lochte is on Dancing with the Stars. I think isn't Rick Perry also on Dancing with the Stars now? Rick Perry is he's a dancing guy. They're lucky that Buck Sexton isn't on Dancing with the Stars. I'd be awesome, although I have a bad ankle, so I probably would fall down trying to do some of that stuff. But still, Rick Perry's up there, Ryan Lochte, and he was on stage last night. I didn't see this, but I saw the clip. And some dudes who don't like him because I guess they feel he defamed Brazil or something tried to rush him when he was on the stage. I never really understand this kind of stuff. Like, who's sitting at home and is so upset at Ryan Lochte who's the swimmer who, and I don't say this to be unkind, but is definitely not going to get an award for being a genius anytime soon. Who thinks that this is somebody that you should like rush on stage, be arrested for? It's just so weird. It makes so little sense to me. That whole story, by that whole circumstance, how that came down, the amount of international outrage at Lochte, I do think there was some sort of, there was an anti-American and, look at this, Norte Americano would be Spanish, and I know Brazil's Portuguese speaking, but you know what I mean? Look at this Yankee imperialist who comes down here and says mean things about Brazilian police, when really he's like some lout who's destroyed this door. The whole thing seemed like, to me at least, it was really blown out of proportion. But now the guy gets rushed when he's on stage by a couple of maniacs. It's like the same thing that I think whenever there's protesters that go to the back of Congress and, like Code Pink or whatever, and they start yelling about something, and protesters who smear fake blood on themselves. Do these people not have anything else to think about or do? It's just... it's hard for like good friends of mine to get me to go to a movie 3 blocks from my apartment because I don't want to commit to too much. I don't want to get ahead of myself. The idea that I would spend my day sort of waiting to get into Congress so that I could protest something, or that I would show up in the audience of Dancing with the Stars so I could try to rush Ryan Lochte and I guess tackle him or something. I don't know what they were trying to do because he said something that I didn't like about, or said mean things about Brazilian police and caused some sort of a scandal. This is just my way of saying people are so nuts. I don't get it. I always tell you to leave room for crazy, and clearly Ryan Lochte, out of the pool, needs to make sure that he leaves room for crazy because crazy's coming after him sometimes. And for what? I mean, this whole thing. The guy lost all these endorsements, got in all this trouble, and I thought the whole thing was really overblown. And then again, I watched very little of the Olympics and just can't bring myself to care all that much. But yeah, I just Dancing with the Stars. One day, team, I'll find myself up there and I'll be doing a paso doble, and you'll be like, "Wow, Buck's got fancy feet. He's doing some crazy stuff up there." But we need to keep growing the team a little more for the next few years, and then I'll find my way up there and I'll show them how it's done. They'll be like, "He's a radio host? He should be a dance instructor." That's not true at all, by the way. I can barely do a box step, but we've got more coming. Stay with me.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show.
Dale in upstate New York, you're on the Buck Sexton Show. What's up, Dale?
Hey, Buck, question or a scenario. We've heard from the pundits how this nuclear agreement is supposed to prevent them from creating weapons for years, but yet we just give them $1.7 billion. What's to stop them from going to a country like Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, and purchasing them?
Well, they're definitely going to be purchasing weapons.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, we would try to stop them through whatever non-proliferation mechanisms we have in place. And non-proliferation was never something that I focused on at the in my professional career at the agency. So I'm not an NP guy. I don't really know much about non-proliferation other than as a sort of student of IR or international relations. Sorry, but. The reality is that the Iranians are going to be buying missile systems from the Russians. They're going to be buying whatever, all kinds of stuff. Now, look, as you know, $1.7 billion can buy you a lot of AK-47s. It can't buy you, a first-rate.
That's not going to help them.
I'm sorry?
That's not going to help them. They want the big bombs.
Oh no, I understand that. I'm just saying, $1.7 billion is not enough to modernize your military or anything. It's enough to buy. A few very high-end fighter planes, and but I don't know what exactly they're going to do. I think they're going to spend that cash, and it is cash, as we were just discussing before with Jay Solomon of the Wall Street Journal. They're going to be giving it to militia leaders, and they're going to be using it to buy arms on the black market, and to pay salaries of fighters, abroad in Syria and in Iraq and elsewhere. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All they need is three. I figure they need three weapons. They need one to use on Israel, one to use on either a city in the United States or Europe, and a third one for a possible EMP attack on the United States.
So you think do you think they want nuke? They're going to buy? I don't know if they could buy off the shelf. They could, of course. I don't know if that will happen. That they'd buy off the shelf nukes. I have no idea. By the way, I'm just thinking of this. What would on the black market? What would a nuke cost you? I don't even know if it's a thing that you could put a.
Look at it like this: the last time the Russian economy went on the skids, there were a lot of Russian generals that weren't getting paid. Those people sit on thousands of nuclear weapons. Do you think they'd miss two or three, or do you think Russia might even do it on their own?
Yeah, this is like the plot of, and thank you for calling in, Dale, from upstate New York. Good to talk to you.
Yeah,
it's the plot of, I think is it The Peacemaker with George Clooney? Was actually a pretty underrated movie for what it was. I thought The Peacemaker was pretty good. There's some good scenes in it. Nicole Kidman still looks like Nicole Kidman instead of today. She's done a lot of stuff, a lot of the excessive plastic surgery stuff. Not good. I'm a fan of people limiting well, now we're going to get into an aesthetic discussion that will probably just get me into trouble. But I think that the human form, such as it is superior to a lot of the ways that people think they're enhancing it these days through all kinds of procedures and stuff. I'm not a proponent of all that stuff at all. And I watch these shows, The Real Housewives. I mean, I've seen clips and heard from people that I know and stuff about these shows with The Real Housewives, and I mean, some of their faces, it looks like they came out of a mold in a factory in China, and they're making thousands of them. I mean, it's just not good to do this stuff, and I feel like there are also just health consequences to injecting and doing all these things that people do. But that's kind of a diversion from The Peacemaker, which is a good movie. Nicole Kidman's good in it, she's fine in it. George Clooney's actually not annoying in it either, and I'm not a Clooney person because he hasn't invited me to Lake Como. I'm a little bitter about that one, George. But the Peacemaker is good. There are some of those movies that fly under the radar that didn't really get as much attention as they should have. Peacemaker's a good national security kind of thriller. I always thought Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt's a good movie. If you haven't seen that one, I would recommend that one too. But Peacemaker holds up. And it ends in New York City, so there's that. Won't tell you how it ends. No spoilers here, everybody. And there was one other. I had a thought that I wanted to share with you all about The Walking Dead, and I can't. Okay, I got a couple Walking Dead thoughts, and I know that all of you are probably all caught up. I'm now finishing season 5, or I finished season 5, so I've got to catch up on season 6. But I'm more or less up to speed with Walking Dead. So this is something that I'll be talking about more because I bailed on it, kind of like I bailed on what's the thing in Hawaii with smoke monsters and all that? It was Lost. Thank you. I bailed on Lost after season 2, and I think that was a brilliant decision because Lost, I knew that there was no way J.J. Abrams and the writers and everything were going to make that make sense, and they didn't. I heard about what happened. Sorry, unacceptable. It's not, it's Hurley's dream. No, not cool. So I bailed on that, and I'm happy about that. Although the first season, whatever, John. Okay, I've heard story. What was it? You can come on here and tell me. Well, it's too much to talk about. Yeah, right. Okay, so it made no sense. Bottom line, you're a Lost guy, John. That's very interesting to me. I'm catching up on Walking Dead. I had a few Walking Dead thoughts that I really wanted to share. One thing is, okay, Daryl and Michonne. I know they've got the cool weapons, right? The samurai. Daryl's got the crossbow. And I'm sure crossbow sales have gone up considerably in the country because of that show. And Michonne with her samurai sword, which I believe those are illegal in New York City, maybe even New York State. I think they're illegal in California too, which just, why? But anyway, they are, I'm pretty sure. Maybe if it's an antique, you can get away with it. But I want to test one. Then again, any knife in New York City that opens with gravity, so most sort of flip knives, not even switchblades, but knives that you sort of just can flip open with your wrist are technically, I think they can arrest you for them. It has to be like two-hand opened. It's so dumb. But they don't care. I mean, they should do a little more caring of the guns, a little less caring of the special weapons, I think. I'm just putting that out there. I feel like Daryl's always walking around with a crossbow. And yeah, okay, it's silent, it's cool, it's reusable. I know guns attract walkers, John, but they get the silencers. I mean, maybe they stop by silencershop.com at some point in that show, plug, and hook themselves up because they get the silencers, and then they're good to go. But especially when sometimes when they might be coming up against other humans who are clearly the real enemy in the show, I feel like they don't carry weapons enough. And there was something else about the show that was bugging me, but I can't remember really what it is now. I do feel like they put themselves in situations more like they're supposed to be these grizzled veterans of dealing with the walkers or the biters or the roamers, whatever you want to call them. All different terms for them in the show. And sometimes it's like, ooh, we're in this abandoned mall. Like, it's surrounded with walkers and there's only one way in and one way out. Like, let's go in here and search for food. It's a little bit of like, come on, guys. Maybe go to the next one. So I know it's TV and it's about a zombie apocalypse, and so maybe I shouldn't be so hard on it. But I'm also thinking about getting back to Homeland because now I just find myself useless to people who ask me. They want to ask me whether Homeland is realistic or not. I'm kind of like, I saw a little bit of it. My big problem there is I'm not a fan of whatever her name is, the lead. I just never liked her very much as an actress. Don't know her as a person. I'm sure she's lovely, or maybe not. What's her name, John? You know her name. The lead in Homeland. Claire Danes, thank you. Yeah, she was also, thanks, Cal. She was also in that weird MTV remake, sort of Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio back in the day. So, anyway, I'll probably get back into Homeland soon. Although Narcos Season 2, that's going to happen this week. That's this weekend's fare for me. Narcos Season 2. Got to hit that. Pablo Escobar stuff. I've seen a few of you, by the way, have written me and said that you've checked out Killing Pablo, the Mark Bowden book, which I'm sure you're really enjoying because it's phenomenal. So thank you for giving me the hat tip or the high five, whatever, on that one. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It'll also make you, I think, enjoy Killing Pablo more as a series, which is very, very good. And then I got to get back into The Night Of, which I'm only one episode into, and I'm about halfway through Stranger Things. I want to like it more than I'm liking it right now. I'm just being honest. The whole, like, the teenager love story thing I find very boring. You know, I want to like it more than I'm liking it. So I'm going to get back into it, but it's not been as good as I was hoping it would be. But then again, I'm not finished with it, so maybe it'll sort of surprise me and things will be awesome again in all things Stranger Things. I'm going to go into a break, and I'll come back talk about something random on the flip side. So don't go anywhere. We'll talk about, I don't know, sugar and fat maybe. That sounds like fun. Be right back.
The Buck Sexton Show.
Discover more at theblaze.com/radio.
The Blaze Radio Network. Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
So I like fat. I like eating fat. I think that fat is delicious. And I think that that's what I think that fat in the diet is a good thing. And I'm a fan of eating fat. Good fats, of course, right? Like not the stuff not margarine. I remember when I was in grammar school, we had, and my mother, to her credit, tried to get the school to change this. They didn't want to give us butter. They wanted to have us use margarine. And, of course, we've since all found out margarine is not only disgusting, but it's just terrible, absolutely terrible for you across the board. Like, it's just the grossest thing ever. And it looks terrible, and, oh, gosh, I wouldn't clean my toilet with it, honestly. So I'm not a fan of margarine, obviously. That's an understatement now. But, yeah, I remember they served that to us. Anyway, point being here, that I think fat is a good thing to eat in the diet, you know, and coconut oil is delicious, olive oil, these sorts of things would certainly be, you know, a little brie sometimes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got to invite the ladies over, you know, pull a little brie out of the, well, you should let your brie sit at room temperature for a while because you don't serve brie cold because you're not a savage. You know, put on a little Cat Stevens, let the cat purr, bust out the Zima and see what happens, you know? I mean, this is just out of the playbook, ladies and gentlemen. This is how you roll. So when you're a single 30-something in New York. By the way, if you have Zima, that would, I think, mean that you must have been storing it for the last 15 or 20 years because I don't think they've manufactured Zima since the late 90s. And Cat Stevens, I had a soccer coach who used to always say that anytime you need help with the ladies, just put on a Cat Stevens CD, which will tell you how long ago this was, and let the cat purr. That's what he used to say. And then, of course, Cat Stevens became like converted to Islam, and it became like Yusuf Islam, I think was his name or something like that. And we'll forget about that for now. Fat is good in the diet. I know I'm getting diverted here, or fat is good. And sugar is basically bad. Sugar tastes good, but is not good for you. There are good sugars, and obviously you get sugar in your food naturally depending on what you're eating. But generally speaking, added sugar is just not a good thing. And when you look at, there's this New York Times piece, I just found this fascinating, that the sugar industry paid scientists in the 60s to make sure that there was no real link between sugar and heart disease and say that saturated fat was the culprit. And I remember being taught to look at labels and such in the 90s, and it was, ooh, saturated fat. You don't want that. That's really bad. That causes heart disease. Just like people say, don't eat eggs. I eat eggs for breakfast pretty much every single day. By the way, I make incredible eggs. I feel like I should just do a podcast on how to make the best scrambled eggs on the planet. Side note, because they're really good. But I eat eggs all the time. I have very low cholesterol, and I eat a lot of fatty food. And whether I'm in for me, a high level of fitness or going through one of my, nesting phases, which I've sort of moved back and forth while I'm at the Blaze, and certainly before as well. I remember the CIA. Well, anyway, I remember the CIA. We used to get paid to work out. That was great. So, not anymore. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, sugar and fat and these sorts of things. So the sugar industry was paying people to downplay that sugar was bad for you and say that saturated fat was like the boogeyman of food. And this was a real effort underway. I mean, this is kind of like the cigarette companies with smoking and downplaying that scientific evidence and lying about it and paying people off and everything else. Because sugary drinks, the link between sugary drinks and obesity and all kinds of really serious health problems is now pretty ironclad. I also find that sugary drinks are just the first thing that one should cut out of one's diet. And this is what, I think I've dropped like 15 pounds or so this summer. No sugary drinks, just done, just never. I mean, if you're going to have some wine or have some alcohol, you realize that you're having a sort of a treat. Especially, but even like margaritas, for example, get margaritas no sugar, which still is not great for you. But like once you start things like caipirinhas, which is sort of like a Brazilian version of a mojito, which is sort of like an American version of a Southside, which is sort of like a Canadian version of a maple swirl drink. I don't know. I just made that up about Canada. The rest of the things were true though. Those have all this sugar that's like pounded into them. Very, very bad for you. But anyway, the point here is that I keep saying the point here, and then I divert from the point. I'm just trying to say that the notion that you can trust sort of government scientists and scientific research to be free of bias, even when we're talking about the most straightforward things, you've got to be a little skeptical, and you've got to do your own homework and your own research on this stuff all the time. It would just seem to make no sense at all. We were being told that saturated fat was the reason for all these health issues in this country. Meanwhile, in other countries, they had much lower levels of heart disease and such. And, I mean, go to France, see what they're eating. It's just all like cheese and melted butter and more cheese, and that's amazing. It's the best part of being French, I would think. So this New York Times piece I thought was very interesting, how the sugar industry shifted blame to fat. And this was essentially a propaganda campaign by sugar. Forget about big oil. Big sugar is something that we should all be taking on, my friends. It is very bad for you. So I just thought I would put that. And they paid off researchers at Harvard and places. I mean, this was really an underhanded thing. And as a result of that, we were all eating less like delicious red meat and butter and things that are great in reasonable moderation. All right.